Hello everybody, this is Brian O'Haron on December 11th, 2008. Dreary day, a lot of rain, not too cold, but damp and cool enough to make it uncomfortable. Time flies. This is, I don't know, something like my 64th or 5th program, and it's been going on for over a year now. I'll be going until the next election in Winston in November of 08. Unemployment's going up. We're officially in recession in America, and the rest of the world's kind of heading in that direction as well. Foreclosures are going up rather rapidly. Consumer spending is on hold, or at least slowing down greatly, aided by banks' inability to loan to people, or people inability to afford the loans. The financial banks received a lot of help on the aggregate demand side from the federal government. And now trying to help the three American car companies. In the middle of that now, I guess today the House of Representatives agreed $15 billion or so for a few month loan. And the Senate will be working on that over now and over the weekend, I guess, to either come to an agreement or not. And then there's some supply side help from mortgage rates going down a bit now and things like that. So we're going to be in this pickle for quite a long time. So don't get up too high hopes for great increases around the town of Winchester over the next 3 or 4 years. We're going to be hurt just like the rest of the United States, maybe more in some cases, because we rely so much on tax revenues from people that live in Connecticut but work in New York City in the financial area and in the banking industry, and even our own state revenue is going to go down because people will be unemployed, won't be working, won't be buying things. It all hits us in the taxes, which will eventually hit Winchester. And there are signs that some businesses in Winchester are already laying off people because they're losing contracts. It's not too great yet, but I imagine that'll increase over the next year. So that's why tonight I'm going to be talking mainly about my old pet peeve, getting more revenue into town. And I'm going to start out tonight with two special guests. The first one is somebody you've never heard of, unless you're English, Mr. Geoffrey R. Cross. Geoffrey is spelled in the English way, Geoffrey R. Cross. And once again, I will be featuring the most important member of our town management team for now and for the foreseeable future, getting to be more and more important as the recession deepens. Our town manager, Keith J. Robbins. Geoffrey R. Cross is featured as a thank you to him for the lessons that he taught me while he was vice president of the Americas Division of UNIVAC in Blue Bell, Pennsylvania, the CEO of International Computers Ltd. Limited in London, England during the 1970s, and chairman and CEO of Grundy Environmental Systems. I was the COO, Chief Operating Officer of this small company in San Diego, California. I couldn't find a picture of Geoffrey. I looked in all my old newspapers. I'm sure I got one around the house somewhere, but I couldn't find one. So tonight I'm using a picture of an ICL building. This one happens to be in Germany, but it's the same facade that all the buildings in London and all over the world had. So you'll see that from time to time during the first half of the program. Keith J. Robbins is featured for the major participation that he will have over the next few years with his direct reports, the land use boards, and the selectmen and various state officials when creating the much needed partnership between the town of Winchester, the state, and the two major developments that are receiving their permits as we speak in the town of Winchester, up along the corridor, the Enterprise Corridor between Winston and Torrington. Once approved by the local land use boards, and remember the Aurora Estate still needs the approval of the Litchfield court. They have reached an agreement on all the conditions, so I guess it's just a matter of time before we get that agreement. But once approved by the local land use boards, Aurora Estates and the Highland Ridge Estates and St. Anne's Country Club along the Enterprise Corridor between Winsted and Torrington will need some cooperative work between the town and the developers and the state to get this thing moving and get more revenue into our town, more taxpayers, increase the tax base, and get the spending into town. Remember now, when I first started talking about this over 3 years ago, a lot of people were in favor of this approach. The EDC, Economic Development Commission, the Redevelopment Commission, the Taxpayers Association, providing there weren't too many students in these 700 units or so. In those days it was more units. Today it's about 700, a little less, plus a country club and a bunch of amenities, including a clubhouse for the country club and ball fields and things like that. So we're going to need a lot of cooperation. I've always said this on this program. So what I'm going to do tonight is go through this first part of comments and go through the way I helped Geoffrey Cross do things when I was working with him on many occasions. So in 1970, Geoffrey R. Cross was about 33 years old. In those days, as I said in previous programs, the major computer companies were run by 30-year-olds. Still are to a certain extent to this day. Geoffrey is an American citizen, born in the UK and educated in Canada. He was a very good, award-winning CEO, Chief Executive Officer, with an excellent financial background in the fledgling computer industry. In 1969, he was the Vice President of Univac's Americas Division. Univac in those days was like the second or third largest computer company in America, and they did $1 billion worth of business. They had about 30,000 employees, of which I was one and Geoffrey was one. The Americas Division included Univac sales and support operations in Canada, North America, and South America for all of Univac. Univac today is called Unisys because it merged with another company and they call it Unisys. I returned from England, where I was working with Univac, to become Geoffrey Cross's Director of Technical Support Services and Customer Satisfaction for the entire Americas Division of Univac. I was at the time about 30 years old. ICL was formed in 1968 in the United Kingdom under the direction of the Harold Wilson-led Labour government. Labour in England means more a socialistic approach than capitalistic approach. As an initiative of Anthony Wedgwood Benn, the then Minister of Technology. ICL was formed in an attempt to create a British computer industry that would compete with major world manufacturers like IBM. ICL represented the last step in a series of mergers that had taken place in the British computer industry since the late 1950s. It's very hard to compete with capitalistic companies when you're in a socialistic environment. I found that out when I went over there to help run this company. The companies that were merged since 1950 to eventually form ICL, International Computers Limited, in 1968 were International Computers and Tabulators, ICT. Remember, IBM started out as sort of a typewriter tabulator company in its beginning. English Electric Computers, Elliott Automation, English and Leo Marconi Computers. Over the years, between 1950 and 1968, Great Britain had merged its various computer manufacturers and in 1968 formed International Computers Limited, headquartered in London, England. For those who know London, it was Putney Bridge was where the headquarters was. Most of their manufacturing was done up in Manchester, which was the old manufacturing part of England. way back in the days when they were good at clothes and yarns and things like that. It's more rural area up there. This was at the time the 5th largest computer company in the world. They also had 30,000 people, but they did nowhere near $1 billion worth of business as UNIVAC did. UNIVAC was a much more productive and profitable company. ICL was not in very good financial shape at the time. A large piece of it was owned by the government. They had many dissatisfied customers around the world, some of whom were owners of the company as well, and was constantly borrowing and seeking money from a shareholder, the British government. So at that time, in 1970 or so, the British government owned a lot of companies, similar to what Obama's trying to do here to help bail us out in America, investing in various banks and finance companies and car companies and things like that. They went through this in the past when in Britain, and I got involved with them just when they were trying to come out of that. They were trying to get out of all these businesses and get them into private hands because Maggie Thatcher was involved, and she was trying to get more, what I would call more capitalism into the society. It still today is not a capitalistic society, but it moved a lot closer under Maggie Thatcher's regime. I can remember 80% taxes over there on income. It's down around 45 now, or 40, so things got a little better over there. Geoffrey Cross was recruited from the Americas division of UNIVAC, now Unisys, in America to be CEO, which in England is called managing director, of the company. He reported to the board of directors. And he moved to London, England, Esher. He hired me initially from UNIVAC, where I was working for him in the same sort of role in the Americas division of UNIVAC. But he hired me from UNIVAC to be vice president, which in England is called director, of worldwide customer support and services, and worldwide customer satisfaction. And again, in a socialistic economy where you can't lay off people or fire people, or even recruit people with the right experience without going outside the country, it's very, very difficult. It's extra tough, I can tell you. As an experienced businessman in the computer industry, Geoff's first action was to tell all of his direct reports, and listen carefully to this because it's germane today in our country. His first action was to tell all of his direct reports that he inherited, and they were an interesting assembly of direct reports because they were all from the major leaders. They were all major leaders of the companies that had been merged over the years. So he had the ex-president of one company and the ex-vice presidents of other companies and the ex-president of some other company. They were all in there trying to integrate all these computer companies from around Great Britain. So as an experienced businessman in the computer industry, Geoff's first action was to tell all of his direct reports that the company would no longer be asking for more money from the government. He said, we will not go to the government, wasn't even there a week, I don't think, when he said this, for any more money, or to bail us out, or to support us. What we will do, ICL, as a company, is we will earn our own keep, borrowing money commercially at competitive rates when necessary. That was a vow he made. That was the first thing. He then set out to manage the company in a profitable manner with the major objectives of profit and customer satisfaction. And there were many dissatisfied customers worldwide. He had a whole list of them, which he gave me the day I showed up on the job, many of whom were the shareholders themselves, company like English Electric, those kind of companies. They own part of ICL, and they had bought computers from ICL, and they were not happy with their performance. Geoff's second action was to ask me to set up mechanisms to ensure that the company solved the long list of difficult existing problems with the customer base and the product line and the support staff, and to ensure that we did not enter into any system contracts that would lead to a loss and or more dissatisfied customers or less profit in the future. Now remember, 30,000 people spread all over the world here, and in those days, PCs did not exist. And most customers ran their businesses on large, complex, very expensive computer systems that were often not designed, manufactured, properly tested, and properly implemented. The cost of these systems range from, say, $50,000 minimum to multi-millions of dollars. If the company lost a major customer, i.e. if ICL or Unisys or even IBM lost a major customer in one industry, say an airline or bank, it would be very difficult, if not impossible, to sell a major system to another airline or bank throughout the world, because all the competitors would go to those airlines and banks and exaggerate your problems you had at the one bank you did lose. Sometimes it wasn't even an exaggeration. Sometimes you deserve to lose those customers. Couldn't save them all. Some were past that. But if their business isn't running and they can't run their business, it's kind of like a lot of the businesses are today. If they can't get capital from the banks, they go out of business and can't run. So this was very, for a computer company in those days, this was very, very important that you didn't lose a customer. It would be very difficult, if not impossible, to sell a major system, as I said, to another airline or bank. Same for Wall Street. Message switching systems around the world for telecommunications in those days and dealing between airlines around the world. I worked on some of those systems. All the Wall Street systems were powered by huge computer systems in those days, etc. So I can't overemphasize how important it was for customers to be satisfied, to have their systems running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. When I was at one company in Scandinavia, worked there a year or so, they couldn't get the information quarterly to their board of directors to make decisions because the computers were so unreliable there. I immediately, upon joining the company and receiving this list of dissatisfied customers, there were maybe 40 of them on the list at that time, huge customers around the world, I immediately set up a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week internal red alert early warning system, like I had done in UNIVAC in the prior years, for worldwide customers and support staff to use. And I also set up a war room in Phoenixville, PA, to coordinate the help of the company for the salesmen around the world, the sales support staff, and the customers themselves. If a system was down, i.e. not running and not working, the customer, in most cases, could not conduct business. And by the way, these were all kinds of problems. Some of them were the air conditioning wasn't running properly, or there was too much dirt in the air. In those days, they were very sensitive to that. Even to this day, they tell you not to drink coffee or eat around keyboards on PCs because you can really jam things up there if you're not careful. So I set up the early warning system and the war room to coordinate the help. If a system was down and not working, this poor customer was at his wit's end. And the last thing he wanted to hear was, we'll be there in a week or two or a month or two to try to help you. He wanted somebody there on the next airplane. There were many, many times when I went from work in Phoenixville, PA, called my wife and said, I'm off to Australia. I'll buy a toothbrush and toothpaste at the airport And then I took a 52-hour flight to Australia where I couldn't even get off the plane because of all the skirmishes around the world in those days. I travel the world at the drop of a hat with technical experts, troubleshooting the customer problems and arranging lasting remedies. This lasted for about 7 years while I was with ICL. The ICL technical resources necessary for success were always placed at my disposal by Geoffrey Cross. He told all of my peers to support me and get out of my way and let me get on with the job. No micromanaging. Nobody ever did try to micromanage me because they didn't have my experience in those days. So when a customer needed a piece of equipment, I'd call up the factory in St. Paul, Minnesota, and I'd say, take one off the assembly line and get it out here on the next airplane. Software, same thing. We needed new releases of software, if we needed changes in the software, if we needed expertise from the development labs in either Pennsylvania or wherever, or in England for the ICL job, England or Manchester, they'd be on the airplane. We also set up a blue border document. The blue border document was very critical. And each major ICL executive, as had happened to be in UNIVAC beforehand, each major ICL executive had to review and commit to the content of this document before commitments were made to new and existing customers. This was to make sure that all our commitments were sound technically, sound from a sales viewpoint, sound from a management viewpoint, and all other aspects. And that in the end, we made a profit, and that the customer's system worked. And I have seen customers in tears when their systems around the world weren't working and they couldn't meet their payroll, and they couldn't get information to the board of directors, and they couldn't satisfy their customers to get on airplanes. Databases used to get wiped out. People would show up at the airport and sleep all night, sometimes for many nights, because the computers were out. So we also set up the blue border document that major ICL executives had to review and commit to before commitments were made to new and existing customers. And then we had to follow up on that to make sure everything we said we would do, that we did. In 5 years' time, and this is some of the beauty of this, in 5 years' time from when Geoffrey showed up on their shores to be the CEO, managing director of ICL, ICL was becoming very successful and won the Queen's Award for excellence. The Queen's Award is given to one company every year. ICL won, and Geoffrey Cross's 50th year for all the work that he and his team had done to revitalize ICL. Geoff then had some health problems. His children had some health problems there, and he had to leave the company. He was recruited by Sir Arnold Weinstein. Most people who know the United Kingdom know Sir Arnold Weinstein, chairman of British, the General Electric in Great Britain. Geoffrey was recruited to run a business that British Electric had just purchased. It was A.B. Dick in Chicago, Illinois. So at the same time he was there as CEO, he was also CEO of Grundy Environmental Systems, and I was the CEO of Grundy Environmental Systems in San Diego, and we had other partners, Stan Grundy, who was a big businessman in England, and we did all kinds of things there. Geoffrey's still around today. I can't find a picture of him, and I'm not quite sure where he is, but he was very instrumental in creating an environment for me to be successful, and in turn himself to be successful. So staying out of my way while I went to do the job, and made a lot of waves doing it, because when you have, it's like, you know, when you're a lifeguard, the first thing they tell you when you go to lifeguard school is you ask them, what happens if the person I'm trying to save tries to drag me down and drown me as well, which often happens. They said, punch him in the chin, knock him out, and drag him in the shore. So Geoffrey set the environment, which is very critical. It's very critical for the selectmen to set the environment here for our town manager, and then let him get on with the job and help him wherever he needs help, as Geoffrey did to me. So I thank you, Geoffrey Cross. Hope to see you again. If I find a picture sometime, I'll put it up here for you to see. But very, very good CEO and chief executive. He also did some other startup companies and worked in the religious field, and he's very well rounded. Now I'm going to go to the agenda. The agenda for tonight is some comments, which I still have to finish. I haven't finished them. I'm going to talk just a bit about the Saturday, 2 more days, the 5th proposed budget. Nothing new on that. Just remind you of the 8 to 8 budget meeting. Then I'm going to remind you of my green papers that I wrote to the selectmen in June of 2006. And then I'm going to give you what my view of my approach, how it can be applied in Winsted for getting these 2 developments into town. The reason I'm going to go over the green papers is you see once again how important it is to get these developments into town for our economic future here. And we know it's going to be pretty bad, as we always said, over the next 3 or 4 years. It's going to be worse than we ever thought it would be. And we need to get a concentrated plan here to get these 2 major developments in and get them up and running and start collecting the taxes and the hookup fees and everything else and the usage fees that we'll be getting. And they're probably, for now I'll say safely, between $5 and $7 million a year once they come to full fruition. There's a lot of work to be done. And we may even get hindered by the worldwide recession, but sooner or later we'll be through that. And if we don't keep going now, we'll never get there. So we got to keep moving, got to take it very seriously. So the town manager and the developments will be my last thing on the agenda. Now I'm going to talk about the approach that I used when I was at both UNIVAC, Unisys, and ICL over in London, England. Number 1, the war room. We appointed managers to the war room. The war room was 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There was a manager in the war room who was always there. There were several managers that worked around the clock, at holidays, weekends, and everything, to take calls from customers around the world, or from sales support people, or from technical support people. We assembled the technical experts required to help us fix all these problems and identify the problems, go out to the customer sites and tell us what the real problems were. One of the things in troubleshooting is you have to get to the real problem, find out what the real problem is. You don't want to spend any time working on things that people think are the real problems, but they're not. And we established a red alert procedure, which meant that there was a procedure for anybody in the world to use to get our attention in the center of the company and in the attention of the chief executive officers of the company to help them out. It's not like a setup, and I use this analogy a lot in this program, it's set up like an intensive care unit in a hospital. So that's kind of what a war room is. Most famous war rooms were, of course, with a space shot, moonshot, where they had round-the-clock war rooms and around-the-clock meetings to look at problems 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and to make sure we didn't lose any lives in that effort. We placed the names of all the satisfied customers in the war room. So we had a tote board, and we knew who all the dissatisfied customers were. We established daily and weekly progress, decision-making meetings with senior executives of the company in the war room. They would have to come, vice presidents, senior vice presidents, often the president himself would be there, the CEO if it was serious enough. And he would make sure people paid attention to these problems and didn't try to shirk them off, which is always the first response when you hear a problem from around the world, to blame it on somebody else. We established worldwide communication systems, so the communications were real-time and they could be handled fast. In those days, that was fax and telephone. There were none of the stuff like we got today. We were in the process then, of course, of installing networks so that we could send these faxes over the network and information over the network. But that was just in the infancy of those days. They were slow-speed lines, and then they became high-speed lines. They were mainly, there were no really worldwide general networks like the Internet today. We had an informed sales network and customers of the red alert procedures so they knew what to do. They had a big education process around the world to let everybody know what we're trying to do. We had to fly to customer sites with other executives if necessary and hold meetings with customers and all support staff to produce a plan for success. Often when I would go to a customer, and I always use the example of Australia because it's far away, but it could be anywhere in the world. I've been everywhere. The only place I haven't been is India. I never got in there for some reason. But they all would try to blame it on the customer, of course, and it turned out never to be the customer's fault. And even if there was a hang-up because the customer wouldn't let us use computer time or something like that, we would go in and ask the customer in a nice way, and he would always give us whatever we needed to get his system up and running again. And then we would explain to this customer what we were doing in our company to try to get his system up, and then we'd keep him posted 10 times a day on the progress to do that. So that happened on every serious customer. Now, if it was one that could be handled locally by sending them a piece of equipment or something that they could handle, then we did it that way, of course. We disseminated, I don't think I've got that spell wrong, but we disseminated a plan to major executives and posted them in the war room. So for each customer that was in trouble, we produced a plan with all the proper support people to get this poor customer out of trouble and get his system back up and running as fast as possible, and to a certain extent, damn the cost. Once you get to that point where you're in intensive care, you stop worrying about cost a little and you worry about saving lives. We manage the plans on a daily or weekly basis with key corporate executives. We had access to all of them on the phone and in the war room and everything. We manage from customer site if extremely necessary. I've gone to customer sites and sat there for months managing my company from the customer site. So I had the exact, up-to-date, real-time information. And I could tell the truth and give the facts to the rest of the people. Again, it's very analogous to a intensive care unit in the hospital. And then we would continue this until that customer was satisfied and said, thank you very much, and started to pay his bills again to us. Sometimes the customer, we wouldn't make it, and the customer would fire us, okay? And again, that's not good when that happens, because it's harder to get new business and more costly to get new business on huge multi-million-dollar systems than it is to spend money to keep the one you got. And whenever I talk to the EDC people in Winston, they say the same thing. Our first priority is to keep the businesses we have in town. Our second priority is to get new businesses into town. Okay, the other thing we did was set up the Blue Border procedure. The Blue Border was a document to be divided into major business commitments prior to selling anything to a customer. Have the costs in there, the revenue, the profit, the product itself, definition, specifications, time scales, etc. Well, there goes the microphone. The microphone fell off here. Okay, we're back again. The document was to be signed off by the highest level executive in each department, sometimes the president of the company. Sales, finance department, product development, product support, etc. I can't name them all here, it would take me hours, but before any major commitment made to a customer. All right, so that's kind of how I approached it with these 30,000 people around the world, and that was what I call a troubling shooting situation, because we were losing money, we were going to the government and shareholders for more money, and we couldn't really manage, we couldn't shut down factories easy, or I think there were like 126 unions in the factory up in Manchester that I worked with, and I'm not disparaging them, I'm just saying it was very, very difficult to get anything done. It took an awful long time, so it was a tough job. Now I'm just going to go over quickly the fifth town budget referendum for 2008, 2009, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., Saturday, 2 more days, December 13th, 2008, at the Pearson School. The proposed tax increase is 0.58 mils, or 2.34%. It was, the last time around, 3.87%. But the number for this time is 2.34%. It's gone down from the 4th referendum to the 5th referendum. We've already had 5 referendums. Saturday will be the 5th. We've had 4 in the past. Started out at 7.10%, then it went to 5.41%, then it went to 0.71 mils, or 2.88%, then it went up to 3.87%, and this time you're going to be voting on 2.34%. Please show up on Saturday between 8 and 8 at Pearson School and vote your preference and your pocketbook and your conscience, whatever it may be. 1 mil, remember now, since the last evaluation of the property here some months back, is now equal to $816,900. I think the previous one, before the we revalued all the property, everything went up an average of 40% here in the last revaluation. We were down like 588,000 or something per mil. Now we're up to 816. So when you see a percentage of a mil here, it's a different number than it was last year. Okay, now I'm going to remind you of what I think we need to do here. This is from my green paper in the year 2006. I'm not going to read the whole green paper, but I got a copy here right from the town hall where I keep it. This is the green papers I wrote, 2006. There's a whole bunch of letters in here to everybody and their brother, but the most important one is to the then selectmen, not the existing selectmen, but the last group of selectmen, who are basically, most of them, not believers in this approach. So the current group of selectmen, 5 out of 7, are in favor of this approach, and they're fostering this approach. And so I just want to remind you that we would get in, let's say, $5 to $8 million once all these projects were put in, and we would have sewer and water free down the road to, or at least less cost, down the road to Torrington, between Torrington and Winsted, so we could also develop more people down the Enterprise Corridor that need city water and sewer. And we'd get a bunch of money in every year once it matures. It would start coming in slowly, and then it would grow. And it would come in from not only taxes, let's say an average, $5,000 for now. I don't have the latest numbers, but per house every year. And we would get the hookup fees, hookup for sewer, hookup for water, and we would get usage fees on sewer and water, and we'd get all kinds of other benefits, construction benefits, people spending in town. It'd be, let's say there'd be about 1,400, 1,500 more people in town. So we get a lot, and we would have kind of minimal costs on it because most of it is age restricted, and about 650 of the units, let's see, 450, 550, well, about 600 units will be age restricted there, if I remember correctly. But anyway, basically, we would get this money in. And remember, I showed a rainbow with a pot of gold at the end of it once this money starts coming in. And then we could take that money, tax money, and we could start spending 20% of it each year on fixing up Highland Lake and getting it in better shape, because we need a lot of money up at Highland Lake over the long run to help with the situation up there. I've talked about it on previous programs. Then, by the way, these percents are just my rough idea. The town manager and the selectmen and the town business runners will make those whatever percents they feel necessary. The town of Winchester Assisted Development, say 20%. That means cleaning up all these buildings in town and helping people to buy them and turn them into more productive property for the town. And that's any kind of a Winchester development that we want to do in town to buildings. Pardon me. The Winchester School System Maintenance and Development Plan, 10%. Give 10% of the tax money to them every year so they can get on and get these schools in shape and redevelop. And maybe you have to put it in a sinking funds for a while until you get enough money. Maybe you can use it for matching funds, for state grants. I don't know. That's the future. But there'll be more money there once we get all these developments in. Maintenance of and new town roads, put 10% aside for that. Maintenance of and new fire trucks, 5% for that. Maintenance of and new heavy-duty equipment for public works, 5% for that. Remember, these percents can be changed by the town management to whatever they want, as long as they don't spend more than 100%. Maintenance of and new town buildings, 5%. Winston School catch-up plan, you're always talking about things they need to catch up on, put 10% aside for that. More teachers, better this, better that, better laboratories, more computers, whatever they have to do. Monitor the development efforts, put 10% aside for that, so that we properly monitor these development efforts and make sure they meet all their commitments on the where we've agreed conditions with them. And then we will be getting some money too from the developer to the town, so the town can hire people to monitor these efforts. And then existing unreserved and undesignated fund balance. That's our fund balance in town, our savings account. I think it's somewhere around 900,000 now, maybe a little less, a little more, but it's in that neighborhood. When I first wrote the papers, it was 400,000 or 500,000, but it should be up around 1.5 million or more. If we get it up to 3 million, we'll be in better shape. But so we put some money, 5% aside or more for that. Now, I also wrote in my green papers, and I'm not going to dwell on this, but for the next 3 or 4 years while we're in this pickle, we need to watch cost savings as well. There's a whole page in my green papers down at the town hall if you want to read it on cost savings. And I made these, gave this to the selectmen and to the school board and to every other board in town that I could go to, was to eliminate duplication between the school and the town. These are not my ideas. These are ideas that have been kicking around town for many years and nobody's done anything about it. We got duplicate computer systems, we got triplicate computer systems, we got duplicate, if not triplicate management in certain areas and purchasing capability and all kinds of things like that. That goes back a long way in Winston, and I'm not the first one to mention it. Good health plans for less money. What can we do to get people good health plans for less money for the town? And I know people are working on that as we speak, and it doesn't come overnight. A lot of these things take 5, maybe 10 years to implement, but you got to get started on it and you got to have a plan. Okay, Town of Winchester Assisted Development, 20%. Winchester School System Maintenance and Development, 10%. Maintenance of new town roads, 10%. Okay, I think I already went over these. I got them in twice. But anyway, I'll move this out because I already talked to you about these. Sorry for that. Sometimes I put things in twice by mistake. Okay, now, what I want to talk about now is how I would approach getting these developments into town based upon the techniques I used when I was in business that I mentioned in the early part of the show. So the first thing I want to say is, for the major enterprise corridor projects are basically the only way we're going to get any additional taxpayers into this town and tax money into this town and get the unless Obama gives us some money, get the sewer and water down the corridor and get other people down the corridor to pay taxes and hookup fees and usage fees. I don't know of any other thing. We have some small things that are happening. There are some companies adding to their existing business, and there's some people leaving and this and that. But, you know, this is the major thing we as a town have to concentrate on. So I decided during this program, since we're in such trouble in the world and in the United States and in Connecticut and in the town, and there's no simple answer to all this, it's going to last for many years, I thought this would be a good time to remind you that, like Geoffrey Cross, when he said, we're not going to take any more money from the government, we're going to get out and make our own success. Well, I think we can do the same thing. Do not misunderstand me. We can get money from the developments to help balance money that were given by the state. You know, most state things that we put up 30%, they put up 70%. This development money can help us put up the 30% to get the 70% in grants. I'm not saying we shouldn't go for any grants, but I'm saying that we need to go and get money so that we can go for more grants if necessary, because we have money to pay our share of. So the first thing I want to say is that we need and it's nothing new, I said this all along, we need to have the whole town pulled together in a symbiotic relationship with the state and the developer, and we need to have a plan to get these developments into town. This plan should be driven by end date objectives, and we should have objective dates along the way for each of the major features of this plan, and we, the whole town, should pull together to create a good environment, impress upon everybody how important this is to the town. I would say probably 95% of the town agree with this. There are some neighbors up around the lake that don't agree with this whole approach, but basically most people in town, including the EDC, the RDC, all kinds of groups here, the Republicans. It was only the Democrats that I had trouble with on this, and I think maybe some of them agree and some don't, but we've never been able to really get them to come out publicly in favor of these developments. But what I'm saying here is we have to do it now. Now is the time to strike. The Republicans are in for at least one more year, and we can get a lot of work done over the next year and get these all this stuff in place, and then the developer hopefully can start working and we could get moving. And what I'm trying to do is jumpstart this. This is a bit of troubleshooting here. We're part of the way along with our permits. We still have a way to go. So here's what I'm going to say. This is the way I do it. Now, first thing I want to say, and you'll see a picture of Keith up there, I hope now, Keith Robbins, the town manager, because he's the key to this whole thing, with the air cover from the selectmen that Geoffrey Cross gave me when I was the key to the success in the computer company. So, not downplaying Geoffrey's point or the selectmen's point, but the town manager is the CEO of this company we have. So the town manager has to either accept for himself. This is my suggestion. I'm sure Keith thinks a lot like me. He's probably doing this already, so this is not a disparagement here. I'm just trying to educate everybody on this program as to what needs to be done to get this revenue in and help ourselves during some very difficult times. Even then, we won't get the revenue in for 3 or 4 years probably at least, but at least we'll be on the way and we can count on it. And it won't be 10 years before we get the revenue in. Okay, the town manager must accept or assign somebody the responsibility for the ownership of a major development plan for success. He must establish this plan for success with his direct reports, with the state, department leaders, and a developer for having all local and state permits complete by a certain date. And that will be more of an objective. You can't mathematically, finitely prove dates. You have to set dates. That's called management by objectives and then management by exception. We've talked about these techniques over the year on this program. So you set the objectives as realistically as you can with this team of people that you assemble, for leaders from each of the areas, and you have a plan, and probably won't be more than 20 dates on this plan. Sewer and water permit granted, sewer and water work started, golf course accepted by the DEP, golf course accepted by the Army Corps of Engineers, development on getting the sewer and water up into the developments started, hookups started, that kind of thing. So that's what needs to be done there, and the town manager is the guy, one way or another, has to do it or assign one of his direct reports or some consultant or somebody to be the driver of all this, the project manager, so to speak, for the whole thing. This responsibility can't be put on the developer alone. We have to take responsibility. I think when Joyce and I were first having children, I might have mentioned it on this program, we always said we're responsible for our children's future and their values. We won't lay it off on the church. We won't lay it off on the state. We won't lay it off on the grandparents. We won't lay it off on anything. What we'll do is we'll be in charge, but we will use all those entities to help us with our children. So we need to establish a red alert procedure when important decisions are necessary or things may be going off track. So once we have this 20 activity plan laid out over the next few years, then we monitor it. And we hold all stakeholders responsible to produce and manage the plan for success. With dates on objectives, that's called management by objectives. Keith would then, or his assignee, one of his direct reports or a consultant or whoever he assigns to get in and be the project manager, will coordinate weekly, monthly, and hourly if necessary, participation of each direct report and stakeholder to produce and manage the plan for success. Those are called action meetings, really. And in NASA we had one 7 in the morning, 5 in the afternoon, and 12 midnight. 3 a day, 7 days a week. And decisions were made, and problems were identified and solved, and that's kind of what you got to do when you have this kind of thing. Now, I don't think we're going to have them 3 times a day. I don't think we're going to have to do any of that, but if there's a problem that needs to be resolved today, or we slip 3 months, then we try to resolve it today rather than slip 3 months. So you got to have these things in the ground. So each direct report and stakeholder is to produce the management plan for success. And then you establish the date with stakeholders for having shovel in the ground, for example, for water and sewer as a subset of the plan. What date is that going to happen? See, we don't kind of work that way. The way we kind of work is like ICL worked and Unisys when I was in there, is we work the other way. We don't have an end date pinned down. We don't have intermediate dates pinned down. We sort of go from one thing to another to another to another. But you've got to start from the end date and work backwards on managed by objectives, and then set up your review meetings once a week or once a month or whatever to manage by exception. Say, where do we stand this month? Oh, we're on schedule. Okay. Is there anything we need to do to keep on schedule for next month? Oh, we're not on schedule. What can we do to get back on schedule? It's that kind of a thing. So we need to establish a date for the state to sign off on the water and sewer plan or the POCD, whatever is going to happen there. Establish for the date for having golf course and Highland Ridge Estates approvals from Army Corps of Engineer and DEP as a subset of the plan. What date are we shooting for? How can we get together with them, come up with a plan to achieve that date? What information they need from us? Whenever I talk to the developer, he seems to never even know when the next meeting is going to be, and I don't blame that all on the developer. I think it's probably part of the state's problem too, and the town's problem. But we all got to know when they're these dates. Whenever I go and ask for dates, when things are going to be done, they never seem to have any. There's always reasons why, and I'm not blaming Keith here. It's not his problem. I'm talking about either the state or the developer and town. They never know what's due when and when it's going to be done. It's very, very hard to even find out when the next meeting is going to be sometimes with these state groups. Now, as far as participation is concerned, it's kind of simple. In the town of Winchester, you've got certain people here. The team leader, I prefer to see it be the town manager because I know Keith's an excellent town manager. I know he thinks a lot this way anyway. I know he's doing things a lot this way. The only problem is I can't get a plan from anybody that tells us, you know, when things are going to happen and when we're going to start getting this money in. So the team participators are the Economic Development Commission EDC chairman, the Water and Sewer Commission chairman and director of Public Works. That's 2 people, chairman and the director of Public Works, Pat Haig. The Inland Wetlands chairman and the Inland Wetlands director, Scott Eisenlohr. The Planning and Zoning chairman, Planning and EDC director, that's Charlie Carno, who works for the town manager. Whoever the decision maker is for the developer, and it should be somebody who can come. We don't need a salesman. We don't need any of that. We need somebody who can come with information and help manage the situation, get the facts on the table, and get us and help us as a team member to get this plan put together and managed to success. Any direct reports that the town manager has as needed, or the selectman if he needs them in a certain meeting. Any consultants as needed, like we do have engineering consultants, Lennard Engineering and other engineering firms around. We have inland wetlands consultants. I don't know the names of all of them. I imagine everybody's got consultants. Planning and zoning's got a kind of consultant, TBA. So they should be in this meeting. It happens once a month or once every 2 weeks, what I call the progress meeting. Right? When I was in Verizon, in that time it was called Telerate before it was bought out by Dow Jones. It wasn't Verizon, it was Telerate before it was bought out by Dow Jones and then sold off to an English firm. We had a meeting every day, 5 days a week, to get a big system up worldwide for trading information around the world. So depends on what you're trying to achieve here. There may be times when the town manager has to call a meeting every day, you know, or Something like that, okay? So we need a scribe there, keep the minutes. We need to present progress at each selectman meeting for visibility. Wouldn't it be nice to see a 20 date plan, when these things are going to happen by at the selectman meeting, and then we can report progress against it? I would say this is the most important thing we as a town have to achieve. We certainly got to keep our budget up. We got to do this, we got to do that, the streets clean. But in order to get revenue in, this is it. And once we get this revenue, everything else will become a lot easier. We need to encourage the community leadership and support leadership and teamwork continually. We all got to be positive about this. And anybody who doesn't agree with it, they should go in the back room. We got to have a team that's positive here and that wants to get the job done. And when I was hiring people, if somebody didn't want to get the job done, then I didn't hire them. Because why have somebody on your team that doesn't want to get the job done? And then the next thing we have to do is publicize the benefits and the progress as widely as possible. And that's very important. We should have publicity. Everybody should be a publicist for this project. It's a little hard because of the politics involved and because a lot of people in business don't want to be known for that kind of thing. But let's get the town all pulling in the same direction. Let's have a plan. Let's work against the plan, and let's produce it. Thank you very much. See you next week.